good Thursday night, everybody. Chris McDonald with you on this McFile Thursday, the 28th day of August, 82825. Grateful to have everybody tonight. We have got a power-packed, studded McFile Thursday night for you. We've got the one and only Bill Federer coming up here in just a minute with a powerful interview. I've been looking forward to this interview all week. We recorded this Tuesday, and it's going to be very, very informative. And I encourage you to listen intently to what he's got to say. We're going to be dealing with Labor Day. Of course, Monday, September the 1st is Labor Day. And a lot of people just consider it an extra day of the weekend to cook out and not have to work. A lot of companies are shut down on Labor Day. Some are not. But it is a national holiday. But you're going to find out tonight the history of it. But in learning about the history of Labor Day, you're going to be learning about how communism has literally almost infiltrated America. And the way that the communists are using a party, a political party, to take foothold in this country. It will come across very negatively. It will come across as Democrats are all the blame. They're not all the blame. Republicans are the blame. We all are the blame because there's been a lot of apathy and a lot of silence about it. And people are scared to speak up against it, afraid of what the media will say about them and what people will say about it. And I think that we've reached a point. I consider what happened yesterday in Minnesota as a prime example. We on the right have tried to warn the country. I know that we've done it on this show. I know that others have done it, of the dangers of allowing an ideology to get taught to kids. We've had January Smith Littlejohn on this show. We've talked to Carla Nicole. She fights for life, but in this fight for life, Carla has also been fighting against this ideology being taught to kids that if you are a man, you feel an urge in your body to transition to a woman, that's normal. And it's not normal. It's not normal. It is against nature. It is against what God has intended man to be. And we're silent. We're scared to say anything because to say anything in that nature, we come across as mean-spirited, bigoted, homophobic, and we come across as hating transgenders. That's the media's narrative tonight, that conservatives and Christians are using this event to hate on transgenders because this sick kid that did what he did yesterday, and he was demon-possessed, killed these two kids, and he would have killed more. He shot 116 bullets into that church. But because we're scared to call a spade and understand that this situation, and I really, I say the term ideology, it is a satanic attempt to destroy individuals' lives, folks. It is a satanic attempt to take these kids, and it is part of his assault on the young people, but it's a part of his assault on Christians as well, and Jews, and anybody that is conservative. It's his attempt to do that. And these drugs that these kids are taking are turning them violent. And I think that we can say the truth in love. We can talk about this in love without hating the transgender. We've done our best to do that. But you cannot escape that this is a growing trend in our country, that the transgender community has turned as violent as the LGBTQ community. They scream tolerance. They scream, well, you need to accept us for how we are. And I think most Christians, most people of faith, we tell them the truth. We speak the truth to them spiritually about the spiritual ramifications of what they're doing, what they've chosen to do. It is both a spirit and a choice. It is a spirit and a choice. And the devil is a very, very deceptive, crafty, demonic, fallen angel. And once somebody gives their will over to him and somebody chooses to go down this path, he will take a mile. You've heard the old saying, you give him an inch, he'll take a mile. Well, Satan don't take a mile, he takes 20. But when you're silent and you're silent in the face of a danger and you don't speak out about it and you don't say anything wrong about it, and I wonder sometimes if we've not even spoken about it as strong enough as we should on this network. And maybe we should have been speaking about it longer and more harsh. I think that I have succumbed sometimes to the fact I'm concerned about people looking at us as being bigoted and whatever, and that's going to stop. That's going to stop. I think that I never will forget I think it was July the 16th or 17th of 2005. Or 15, not 5, but July 26th. That's what the day was. July the 26th of 2015, when the Supreme Court opened up the floodgates and they erroneously and demonically basically sanctified and sanctioned same-sex marriage on a national basis. I never will forget it. I was sitting upstairs at my home at the time. I had a little apartment, and my brother called me. And I was getting ready to call him, and we must have felt led to call each other because he called me, and we got on the phone together. And he said, bro, he said, I feel sick inside. And I said, I feel sick inside too, bro. And he said, I believe this is going to open a Pandora's box, and it's a box that this nation's not going to be able to close because now everything will be on the table. Everything that is sexually perverse, everything that deals with identity, gender identity, sex with animals, sex between men, any kind of perversion, any kind of deviant sex, any kind of deviant relationship is going to be ordained now. And folks, when you get down to the transgender situation, I'm not talking about the people, but what is changing a sex of a child, mutilating, castrating children is nothing but demonic deviance. There's nothing to wrap that up in a bow. And I've got a point why I'm saying this tonight, because it has to do with our interview with Bill. We stayed silent in the church. We stayed silent behind pulpits. We stayed silent behind platforms. I didn't have a platform then. Our show started a couple of years after that. We started in 2018. We stayed silent in the face of this, and they took over our nation. And now we've got trans individuals gunning themselves up, going into schools and shooting schools up and churches up and trying to create as much carnage and death as they can. And it's not just them. Please understand that. That's not what I'm saying tonight. It's not just the trans, but there is a growing violent movement. It's almost like Black Lives Matter and Antifa. It's becoming an armed force, an armed group of the left to exact revenge against Christians and anybody that is going to stand up for the truth of this. And I want to just say this before I turn it over to Bill tonight. If you're a transgender and you're listening to me tonight and you're getting angry and you say, well, you're just a bigoted blank, we love you. Please understand that. We have nothing but the love of Jesus in our heart for you. I don't even judge you for your lifestyle. You've got to stand before a God that I've got to stand before. We're not going to stand before that God with each other. I'm not going to stand with you. You're not going to stand with me. You've got to give an account for your life just like I got to give an account for mine. But I will tell you this, what's bothering me tonight and what I've been troubled about all day is the mother of this kid. She gave him a green light when he was 16 years old to go through with this transitioning. He had so much junk. He had so much junk in his head you can't shake a stick at. And January Smith Littlejohn's girl, the school system put so much junk in that kid's head that she was getting ready to transition to a man, and had the Smiths and the Littlejohns not caught it when they did, they could have very well lost their daughter. She was being told by a school counselor that these feelings you've got is because you're uncomfortable in your body as a woman, so you need to change yourself over to a man. That was coming from a school board in Leon County, Florida. And these kids are being filled with this junk. They're targeting our kids who are in turn arming themselves and targeting us. And you can't escape that fact tonight, folks. You just can't escape that fact. You can't escape it. And I know that not everybody's going to agree with that sentiment. Not everybody's going to shout hallelujah to that and clap their hands to that, but that's how it is. And then I get the other end of this spectrum, that the Christian community, there are some that stand there and preach their sermons to the transgender. They preach their sermons to that community, and they hammer that group without love, and they judge, and they think that that's the only perversion out there. It's not the only perversion. Our silence is more perverse than what they've done. What the media is saying tonight is more perverse what the actual act was yesterday. The left's comments, blasting Christians for praying for these people, blasting Christians for their stance, is more perverse than anything that young man did. And he was a man, by the way. Don't let the media... You got CNN out there tonight arguing whether he was a man or a woman. Jake Tapper was concerned that we might get his pronouns wrong in describing him. That's more perverse than the act itself. But Christians, we have no stones to throw. We have no stones to throw, and we better be careful about that. It's our job to be a light. It's our job to be a light. But this is where this interview with Bill comes in. We've done the same thing in the face of the communist takeover of America. We've been absolutely silent. We have been absolutely silent and allowed them to literally rip our country to pieces with another ideology that is just as evil and just as wicked and has just as much destructive power. They've done it through our state legislators. They've done it through our city councils. They get to D.C. They turn it into congressional runs. They get in Congress. They get in the Senate. They get on the courts. And ultimately, we're going to get a full-fledged communist, Marxist jihadist in office in the mayorship of New York City, or maybe even one day we may wind up electing a Marxist president. We had one in Obama. We had one in Biden, but Biden was so mentally impaired he couldn't carry out what he wanted to carry out. But the people behind Biden were Marxist communists, and they were running the country. That's why we had what we had for 4 years. This did not start yesterday. This war has been going on over this country really from our start. It's going to get more intense. And I want you to listen to Bill Federer tonight. We got James Akers coming on a little bit after that. We're going to try to not keep you so late tonight that you got to hold your eyes open. That's why we're coming on now. But we'll go an hour and a half and be done with it tonight. McFilesForum@gmail.com if you've got a question. Here's Bill Federer. I hope you enjoy the interview. I'll be back to say a few things more to you at the end. If you're grateful you're with us tonight, put some fire in that house. You're going to enjoy this interview, folks. I encourage you to listen intently. If you got any questions, save them till the end of the show. We'll take your questions at some point. Here's Bill Federer and the history of communism and the history of Labor Day. Enjoy. And a good evening, everybody. Chris McDonald with you, the McFiles News and Faith Network. We're so grateful to have this dear gentleman. He's a good friend, and we've had him on several times and got to meet him in person even a few years ago. Bill Federer, American Minute. And we are so grateful, buddy, to have you tonight. As we're recording this, we've got Labor Day coming up here, September the 1st. And I want you to talk about that tonight. We're going to have Bill on at a later time, at some point. The next time we have him, we're going to be talking about the Jewish feasts and how they relate to Bible history and so forth. But tonight, I want to talk about Labor Day. But before we do that, let me welcome you. It's good to see you. Hope you've been doing well. It's always a pleasure to have you, my friend.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to be with you.
It's an honor to have you. I do want to just say, check his website out, and he's got several books and great information if you want to know about the history and the Bible and the world and commentary on good things. We give your book. I've actually got your book, The Silence is Consent. And it is one of the best books I've ever read about how we need to raise our voices against tyranny. I'll give you a good heads up. And that book has been one of my favorites I think you've written in recent years. And I tell you,
Oh, God bless you.
so I appreciate that. Tell us a little bit about Labor Day. I know people think Labor Day is just a day to take off from work, but there's a rich history about it in the country. And why people celebrate Labor Day. I want to let you to go ahead and do the talking, and it's good to have you tonight.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I put together a book and it's called Socialism, the Real History from Plato to the Present. And I have a lot there about Labor Day. And I think it's on the shelf behind me
Yeah.
there. But Labor Day's history is a little more interesting than hot dogs and picnics. And we have to go back and realize that for most of world history, people were working and in trades and farms, butcher, baker, candlestick maker, cabinet maker, upholsterer, tailor, milliner, cobbler, chandler, which means candle maker, cooper, which is a barrel maker, wheelwright, which is a wheel craftsman, blacksmith, gunsmith, printer, apothecary, right, pharmacy. And then the Industrial Revolution started, and people began to work in factories. So, the background of the Industrial Revolution in Ireland, they burned peat from bogs to heat their home. So, this is mucky mud, but it's got a lot of uh, plant content in it, like straw, but you would put it in the fireplace and it would burn. They would dig out this mud and let it dry out and chop it into square blocks, and they put them on wagons and they'd go around selling this peat. But if you let it sit in the bog for centuries, it goes down, down, down. It gets pressure, 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 and it turns into coal. So in England, they had coal mines. And the problem was that they filled up with water when it rained. And so a Scottish inventor named James Watt invented a pump to pump water out of the coal mines. It was a steam pump. It was this idea that when the air got hot, it expanded, and then if you cooled it, it contracted, and that simple thing he was able to do to turn pistons and turn into a steam engine, and then it went from pumping waters out of a well to running factories and railroads. And so you had steam engines that turned into railroad uh, engines and steamboats. But the main was textile. What's that? Cloth. So instead of a lady, if you shear a sheep and put the threads, the hairs of the sheep together, they have little, under a microscope, you can see little barbs. And like Velcro, the tighter you pull them, the tougher it gets, and it turns into a string or a thread. And then they would weave the thread together to make sweaters, and quite labor intensive. But now with a steam engine turning with leather belts and turning these large, uh, oh, where they would have the thread go back and forth and back and forth, it would make cloth. And you can buy an entire bolt of cloth ready to cut up and sew versus having to make the thread. And this is called the Industrial Revolution. Then they developed steel, and then they could make steel railroads, but also pipes. And now you can pipe water into a house rather than having the ladies go to the well and bring it in. The Industrial Revolution basically freed up women. So instead of them doing all these menial tasks of, washing clothes, taking it down to a creek, they could have a washing machine in their house. Uh, but the Industrial Revolution had factories, and people worked in factories. And sometimes the factories did not have safe working conditions. People would lose a finger or a hand, or somebody would fall into a vat of, molten steel and be swallowed up. And so you would have the workers saying, we need safer working conditions, and then they would organize into unions. The first union in America was 1794. It was the shoemakers in Philadelphia unionizing. But then we have to throw in another little piece of the puzzle, um, taxes. So when we, the British, the Industrial Revolution started in 1760, but the British did not let the British colonies have factories because the factories in England that were making a lot of money wanted the politicians to make sure that they kept the business.
Interesting.
So people in America would have to buy stuff from the English factories. And when the America became independent of the British, the first, well, I think it was the second bill Washington signed was a tariff bill to make the goods imported from England and France and Holland more expensive intentionally so that people, business owners in America could afford to put in the capital investment and build a factory and begin to make the stuff that they were making in Britain, only making it in America. And it would create jobs. But the problem was that most of the factories were in the northern colonies and the northern states. And then the southern states stayed agricultural. And so the southern states now had to buy more expensive stuff from Europe because of these tariffs, or more expensive stuff from the northern factories. And the South collecting tariffs was basically the one paying for the federal government's budget. So prior to the Civil War, at one point, 90% of the federal government's budget was from tariff taxes protected in the South. And there was no income tax yet. Lincoln pushed that through during the Civil War. So the animosity between the North and South, the South threatened to stop collecting the tariffs, and that's when troops were sent to the port in South Carolina to say, nope, you're going to continue to collect tariffs. And that's when the South shot a cannon at Fort Sumter, and it began the Civil War. Anyway, after the war, the South didn't have any political power for a long time, and the North passed lots of tariffs, and it worked. And the northern factories became very prosperous and brought this industrial revolution to America. And we're making everything. And again, clothes, glass, dishes, farm tools, tractors, railroad cars, and you had the Pullman Railroad Car Company in Chicago. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So Europe had immigrants leaving and coming to America. And they would work in these factories. And Scandinavians and Irish and Italians and English, Greeks, Poles, Russian, Jews, and Germans. And some of the German immigrants in the 1800s brought with them Karl Marx's idea of redistributing the wealth. And so when you look at it, Europe had centuries of entrenched elites, and they would own everything for centuries. And it was nearly impossible for a common person to accumulate wealth and move up the ladder. It was just the way it was. And so Karl Marx's ideas had a appeal to the poor people in Europe, saying, hey, let's just overthrow the rich and take their wealth and redistribute it. In America, we did not have centuries of entrenched wealth. Most people that were successful, it happened in one lifetime. They were innovative, they worked hard, and they built their business and their factory, and they hired people. And but nevertheless, when these German immigrants came over, bringing their Marxist ideas with them, they were like, "Let's take away the money from the wealthy people." And so the first union organizing flyers in America were printed in German. And so you had this move for the immigrants pushed to have an income tax. And so they passed one in 1894, but the Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional. But it was this socialist idea of take from the rich and redistribute it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had the Pullman Railroad Car Company in Chicago. And they were really nice. They built little houses for the workers to live in. And then they built stores for the workers to shop in. And that way they could live and work and not have to worry about commute time. And then they would even build little churches, little communities. And then they would even pay them in company script.
Hmm.
All right. It wasn't dollar bills, it was script. So you could, you get paid some script. You could cash it in at the grocery store. You could, buy stuff with it. You could pay your rent with it. And everything is fine for a decade until orders for Pullman Railroad cars dropped off. And the Pullman Railroad car company is like, what do we do? We have all these workers, and we don't need as many railroad cars anymore because the orders. And so they began to lay off people and pay them less. And Eugene Debs comes in to the picture, and he, instead of realizing that the company is facing struggles, he organizes these union workers to strike. And they they did have a strike. And by the way, there was a strike previous to this that's worth noting. In 1886, you had a Cyrus McCormick, and he had a factory, and he built harvesting machines, farm equipment, tractors.
Mhm.
And there was a protest in Chicago near Haymarket Square against the McCormick Harvesting Machine Company. And the police showed up, and one of these socialist type people threw a bomb. This peaceful protest throwing a bomb. I know this is hard for us to imagine would ever happen in America. But the blast killed 7 police officers and 4 civilians, wounded dozens of others. And the workers liked this. And so they made the day, May 1st, the International Workers' Day. And so that was 1886. It was a big deal. And the state or the city of Chicago erected a statue to honor the policemen who were killed in this Haymarket riot. And so now we're up to the railroad car strike, 1894. George Pullman has to cut the wages, and the workers are not happy. And so Eugene Debs decides to organize the railroad workers. And they have a protest that turns into a riot. I know that's hard to imagine. And the riot spread from state to state to state. And then it went from striking to destroying $80 million worth of railroad cars and railroad property in 27 states.
Wow.
And so I know it's hard for us to imagine that you could have people organizing very destructive things state to state, but it happened in America in 1894. And so the New York Times ran an editorial July 9th, 1894, and they're calling Debs a lawbreaker at large, an enemy of the human race. It was nicknamed Debs Rebellion, and it interrupted mail delivery. And that was a federal crime. And so President Grover Cleveland sends out the U.S. Army troops to stop the crime, stop the killing, stop the destruction. And so 12,000 U.S. Army soldiers were deployed to bring order to the streets of the city of Chicago and other cities. I know it's hard that you could imagine the president ordering troops to go into a city to stop crime. But that's what Grover Cleveland did. So
He's Republican. Grover was a Republican, correct?
No, he was a Democrat.
Interesting. Go ahead. I got a reason
Yeah.
for asking that. Go ahead.
And so you had these so the at the time, Republicans were anti-immigrant, and the Democrat Party began to transition. But these riots and these shutdowns, the public blamed on the Democrat Party and the Democrat Party policies. And now they're facing the midterm elections. And the Democrat advisor to President Grover Cleveland is Francis Lind Stetson. And he says, we're going to lose the midterms. He says, we are on the eve of a very dark night unless a return of commercial prosperity relieves popular discontent with what the public believes is democratic incompetence to make laws. And so Grover Cleveland said, okay, we have to appease these workers. And so he came up with the idea of giving them a day off and called it Labor Day. And so the workers wanted Labor Day to be on May 1st because that would be together with the International Workers' Day and the anniversary of the bloody Chicago Haymarket riot. And they wanted to have that anniversary. Grover Cleveland instead chose the first Monday in September to be celebrated as Labor Day. What happened to May 1st? Well, patriotic Americans celebrated May 1st as Loyalty Day. Congress recognized May 1st as Loyalty Day in April of 1955, and President Eisenhower made May 1st Loyalty Day with an annual holiday, Public Law 85-529. So that's May 1st. Well, what happened in the 1894 elections? Did the Labor Day help the Democrats? No. They had the biggest midterm loss in decades. What happened to Eugene Debs, the organizer of this 1894 railroad strike? He was arrested, again, because he was obstructing the delivery of mail, and he was put in jail for 6 months. While in jail, did he read the Bible? No, he read Karl Marx's Das Kapital. He read it over and over and over again. And when Debs came out of jail, he organized progressives to push to redistribute wealth, which led to the first corporate income tax in 1894, the personal income tax in 1914, and the interstate estate tax in 1916. Back then, those taxes were only on the rich. The first income tax was a 1% tax on the top 1% richest people in the country. It was not going to tax the people. So Debs, he had an attorney named Clarence Darrow. And you know Clarence Darrow because he defended evolution in the Scopes monkey trial.
That's right.
And so after Debs's release, he found the Socialist Democracy of America Party in 1897. And then he founds the Social Democratic Party of America in 1898. And then he founds the Socialist Party of America in 1901. And Eugene Debs ran for U.S. president as a candidate 5 times from 1900 to 1920. He won 0 electoral votes. And so he did not like the electoral process. And so he began the movement to get rid of the Electoral College. Now, World War I starts. Eugene Debs is not just a socialist organizer of strikes. He opposes the draft. And one of the people that followed his advice was Roger Baldwin, who was a draft dodger. And Roger Baldwin formed the ACLU for the purpose of defending communist agitators.
Wow.
Roger Baldwin said, I am for socialism. I seek social ownership of property, abolition of the property class, sole control of those who produce wealth. Communism is the goal. So if anybody reads, Lenin said socialism is a transition phase from capitalism to communism. And so communism is the goal when there is, and Karl Marx says communism is summed up in one sentence, abolition of private property. And so that's the goal, right? So socialism is the transition phase, but the goal is communism, where there'll be no private property in the whole world, and everything will be controlled by a deep state bureaucracy giving out favors to their friends. Well, Debs, he was so influential, he influenced Vladimir Lenin. Yes, that's right. Russia's socialist leader, Vladimir Lenin, overthrew Tsar Nicholas II in the Bolshevik Revolution, which killed 12 million people. And Lenin talked about how Eugene Debs inspired him in, quote, an open letter to Boris Souverain, published January 27th, 1918 in La Venta number 48. Lenin said, look at America, apart from everything else, a neutral country. Haven't we the beginnings of a split there too? Eugene Debs, the American rebel, declares in the socialist press that he recognizes only one type of war, civil war, for the victory of socialism, and that he would sooner be shot than vote a single cent for American war expenditure. And then Lenin writes in 1919 in an appeal to German independence, I quoted the statement of the American rebel Eugene Debs to the effect that he would rather be shot than agree to vote for imperialist war loans, and that he would agree to fight only in a war of workers against capitalists. So Eugene Debs is influencing the Russian Revolution. Eugene Debs gave a speech in Cleveland, Ohio, advocating for this, and he was arrested and for sedition and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Well, all of his supporters, union members, socialists, anarchists, communists, decided to have a peaceful protest to support Eugene Debs that, you guessed it, turned into a riot and destroyed thousands of more dollars worth of stuff. It's called the May Day riots of 1919. Debs's attorney, a couple years later, asked President Woodrow Wilson for a pardon. Woodrow Wilson wrote across the paperwork, denied. And then Woodrow Wilson says during World War I, while the flower of American youth was pouring out its blood to vindicate the cause of civilization, this man, Debs, stood behind the lines sniping, attacking, and denouncing them. This man was a traitor to his country and will never be pardoned during my administration. And then Warren G. Harding, the next president, didn't pardon Debs, and he had his White House release a statement. There is no question of his guilt. He is a dangerous man, calculated to mislead the unthinking and affording excuse for those with criminal intent. Eugene Debs was the subject of a documentary praising him, produced by Bernie Sanders in 1979. Bernie Sanders had a portrait of Debs in the City Hall of Burlington, Vermont, and Bernie Sanders dedicated a plaque to Eugene Debs in his congressional office in Washington, D.C. So Vladimir Lenin, he overthrew Russia's government and decided it's not just supposed to stay in Russia, it's supposed to go worldwide. And so in 1919, Lenin formed the Communist Internationale. And so Eugene Debs's Socialist Party of America decided to form the Communist Party USA. And it ran candidates for president every year from 1924 to 1940. Why did they stop in 1940? Because that's when the Communist Party USA began to support Democrats. And Democrat President Franklin Roosevelt had a New Deal program, and that was very socialist. The government paying everybody, the government confiscating everybody's gold. And Franklin Roosevelt made a treaty with Joseph Stalin, the head of the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, during World War II. So the Communist Party said, why do we need another party? Here we got a Democrat president that's doing socialist New Deal programs, and he's making treaties with the socialist Joseph Stalin. I mean, we got it all. And so even Ronald Reagan noticed how the Democrat Party began to be infiltrated by communists. And Reagan said, I didn't leave the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party left me. So Chicago, this is where you had Cyrus McCormick, his tractor factory, and the Haymarket riots, and the statue to honor the fallen soldiers of the Haymarket riot. But then you had the Weather Underground in 1969, led by Bill Ayers and Eric Mann. And they had a Days of Rage where they blew up the statue for honoring the fallen policemen at the Haymarket Square. So the city rebuilt the statue, and the Weatherman Underground blew it up again in 1970. And the Weatherman Bill Ayers launched the political career of State Senator Barack Obama, had a fundraiser in his house. And Bill Ayers said, I am a radical leftist, small c communist. Maybe I'm the last communist who's willing to admit it. The ethics of communism still appeal to me. I don't like Lenin as much as early Marx. So that's Bill Ayers. Well, Eric Mann, what happened to him? He trained Patrice Cullors, one of the founders of Black Lives Matter. And Patrice Cullors stated in 2015, myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We're trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories. So Black Lives Matter, having riots, tearing things down, that goes back to Bill Ayers and Eric Mann, and the Haymarket riots, which goes back to the socialists that blew a bomb that killed people. That came back from these German immigrants who were bringing with them these Karl Marx's ideas. Now, laborers in America, you work, you get wages, you buy things. Trucks, houses, cars, boats, guns, everything else. Laborers in socialist countries like the USSR, you work, you don't buy anything because you don't get paid money because the government owns you, owns everything, decides what people get and what they don't get. And it's a demotivator. And so their amount of work that the workers do, they try to do as little as possible. Why should I work really hard? I get paid exactly the same. I don't even get paid. The government, you know. Anyway, if you own stuff, not only can you buy trucks and guns, you can give away money in charity. Well, if you don't own anything in a socialist country, how can you be charitable? How can you give away something you don't own?
And
And so their goal is when they get rid of all private possessions, there'll be this wonderful utopia and the world will just be perfect. And so even John Lennon in his 1971 song, Imagine, says, you know, imagine no possessions and no religion too.
religion too.
And
I'm
Klaus Schwab with the World Economic Forum said, by 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy. And so socialism, where did that term actually come from? Came from a French philosopher, Henry de Saint-Simon, 1760 to 1825. And he had the definition of socialism to be the opposite of the word individual. So you have individual, and then you have this socialism, which implies group ownership of everything. And so Karl Marx, Frederick Engels, Leon Trotsky, Antonio Gramsci, they were pushing socialism against individualism. But America and all of Judeo-Christian Western civilization is based on individualism, that you have a worth as an individual because you are made in the image of God, and this God is not a respecter of persons. So we all have worth and we're all equal. Well, in socialism, there is no God. You're not created in his image, and you're not equal because if you can contribute to the state and make the state bigger, the state values you. If you're a drag on the state or you want to get rid of the state will use its power to crush you. And so in socialist countries, your worth is dependent on what group you belong to, right? The CCP, right? And Antonio Gramsci writes in 1916, socialism is precisely the religion which must overwhelm Christianity, get rid of individual worth and transfer everybody to being identifying with groups and getting their value and worth by belonging to these different groups. And so the and how do you do that? You create crises. So Karl Marx and Frederick Engels explained in their collected works, conspirators by no means confine themselves to organizing the revolutionary proletariat, the working class. Their business consists in spurring it into artificial crises. For them, the only condition required for the revolution is a sufficient organization of their own conspiracy. They are alchemists of the revolution. So you can't get people to change the status quo unless there's a crisis. So you want to create crises to get everybody to be motivated to want to tear down the system. And then out of that, tearing down will miraculously come a utopia where everything's perfect. When that doesn't happen, in reality, you have gangs. You tear everything down, the most powerful gang leader is going to seize power. And so uh, back to Labor Day. Labor Day did uh, come into being as a result of Grover Cleveland wanting to appease the workers. The workers did have legitimate concerns. There were really bad working conditions, often, not always, but often. And the unions pushed to have an 8-hour workday. That's where that came from. The
Interesting.
unions pushed for a 40-hour work week so that you could have a 2-day weekend. The unions pushed for minimum wages. They safer working conditions, ending child labor. That's a good thing, and more benefits for workers. So, yes, we have to acknowledge that the unions did improve working conditions, but there were consequences. The factories now have more expenses because of these shorter working hours and more benefits, but the factories have to be in business. And so they have to sell stuff and they have to lower their price because there are competitors. And so this motivation now is for the government, for these businesses rather, to want to find ways to cut expenses. If they can't cut the labor expenses, they got to cut other expenses. And so Henry Ford, his Ford Motor Company, he had lots of factories and lots of workers, and these workers were unionizing, and these workers were demanding more wages, and it was getting more expensive. And the story circulated how Henry Ford was going around the world looking for alternative sources for rubber. And he'd go to South America, go to the jungle. And so as he's traveling the world, he's over in the Middle East, and a Yemeni Muslim was putting the luggage on the boat, and he was doing a good job. And Henry Ford told him, if you show up in Detroit, my factory will pay you $5 a day. And then word spread. And so Muslims began immigrating to Detroit and working in these factories. Why? Because Henry Ford wanted to break the control of unions. And the unions were what? Anti-immigrant.
Anti-immigrant. That's good.
Unions did not like immigrants because they would come in and they would work cheaper and they wouldn't unionize. And if they were Muslim, they had a cultural difference that it was hard for them to. And so ArabAmerica.com reported September 5th, 2020, the origin story of how the Yemeni community in Michigan is an interesting one. Way back in the early 1900s, Henry Ford started recruiting Yemeni workers to work at Ford's factories. After a few years, Ford sent more workers, and the Yemeni American community began to grow. People who gained citizenship during their time working for Ford brought family over and started lives in Michigan while remaining close to their family back in Yemen. And so you began to have these Muslim communities coming to Detroit, and they grew in population, and they began to take over these Polish neighborhoods and these other traditional neighborhoods, and they did not unionize. And so today people are wondering, how did you get such a large, Arab Muslim community in Detroit? Well, it was
As
Henry Ford brought
Ford.
them over to break the unions. And then as unions would have dues, these dues would be collected and given to candidates. And often the union dues would support candidates that believed something different than the union workers. So many union workers like to own guns, but they would give money to candidates that wanted to ban guns. And many union workers believed in traditional marriage, man, woman. But many of the candidates that got money from the unions were pushing for gay marriage and other things. Union workers believe there's a man and a woman. Well, they're giving money to candidates that can't even define woman, and they're pushing LGBTQ transgender stuff. Many union workers want to protect the unborn, but the union leadership gives dues to candidates that hold pro-abortion views. And then you have another way to lower the cost of working, and that's to automate and make more stuff, replace human jobs with machines, and then outsourcing. And that was the big one. So as the price of goods began to increase, the price of labor, rather, the businesses and factories would move to other countries. And this happened really after World War II. So after World War II, the Marshall Plan, the U.S. was paying money to rebuild Germany and Japan. And we were getting American contractors to go over there and help rebuild. And they would help rebuild factories with brand new equipment. And they could make stuff cheaper than what the American factories could make because they're using pre-World War II equipment. And then you had businesses saying, let's get rid of the tariffs so we can make stuff cheaper in these other countries and then ship it into America cheaper and sell it cheaper, and it would put out of business more American factories. So those would close up shop, go over to India or China or someplace and open up their factory. And so, yes, the unions did succeed in improving benefits, but it cost the companies more. The companies decided to move their factories overseas and it started this flood leaving. That's why Trump wanting to raise the tariffs to make goods coming in from other countries more expensive. Then people say, wait a second, it's better to have our factory located in America than in these other countries because then we don't have to pay the tariffs.
Right.
And so Trump's trying to reverse the flow. And so back to the Labor Day history. You have, again, immigrants coming over, working in factories, organizing. You had Eugene Debs. He's an organizer. He decides that have strikes that destroy stuff. He starts the Socialist Party, and off that splits the Communist Party. That the Communist Party infiltrates the Democrat Party, and even Zell Miller was I think the last pro-life Democrat senator.
He's from
That's
the
right.
state of Georgia. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was a Democrat senator who was pro-life, right? You don't have those anymore.
No, you don't.
But I even recorded it. I met him a couple of times, and he liked my books. But he talked about how the Democrat Party was changed through these people coming in with their socialist ideas. And so you have the Labor Day history of coming up to the contrary to what we're doing in America. America wanted to emphasize the individual, empower the individual, give you more money so you can buy more stuff. If you want, you can be more charitable with your stuff. But the socialist idea is to take away your stuff so that the government controls it, and then you just become a ward of the state. Warning Americans of this was Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who lived in Russia and was arrested and spent 11 years in Soviet labor camps. So here's somebody that was from over there, and he says, I call upon America to be more careful with its trust, prevent those who are attempting to establish even finer legal shades of equality because of their distorted outlook, short-sightedness, and self-interest, from falsely using the struggle for peace and social justice to lead you down a false road. Solzhenitsyn says, they're trying to weaken you. They're trying to disarm your strong and magnificent country. I call upon you, ordinary working men of America, do not let yourselves become weak. So here's somebody that's from a socialist country warning America, don't go down the socialist road. I've spent 11 years in labor camps. But America was known for entrepreneurship, and that anybody could have an idea, work hard, hire people, and become successful. And so Booker T. Washington, he was a former slave. I wrote a book on him. He was a president of Tuskegee Institute. and he forms the National Negro Business League in the year 1900. Matter of fact, it was him starting this that inspired 10 years later the formation of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And so Booker T. Washington said, anyone can seek a job, but it requires a person of rare ability to create a job. What we should do in our schools is to turn out fewer job seekers and more job creators.
Wow.
So instead of thinking, okay, I want to get a job and my boss isn't paying me enough and I'm going to strike and I'm going to destroy stuff, it's like, look, go out, start another business. Then you own it. You can decide what you want to pay yourself, right? Reagan stated in 1988, I believe God did give mankind unlimited gifts to invent, produce, and create. And so this idea that instead of it having a pie and saying, you're getting a bigger piece than me, it's like, go out and bake another pie.
That's
You can
right.
have the whole thing, right? So instead of a closed-mindedness that leads to a selfishness, it's a large-mindedness. It's like your God can do anything, and He gives ideas away for free. Just seek Him, and He wants to bless you. Why? So that you can establish His covenant. You can be so blessed that you can have money to help the poor. You can give money to good causes, um, and uh, and then I like a spiritual insight. 1 Corinthians 15. Therefore, my brethren, be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord.
Beautiful.
For as much as you know that your labor
It's not.
in the Lord is not in vain.
Bill, let me ask you this. We've got about 10 minutes here, 15. I do want to ask you just a few questions about all this that you've said. And some of these are opinion questions. Do you feel like that this current Democrat Party has totally sold itself out to these communist ideas? Because you described what you were describing that was taking place in the Grover Cleveland days and all that at the turn of this century, the 19th century, 20th century. But it's a blueprint. It's like our newspaper headlines right now here in America. And do you feel like the communists have succeeded in infiltrating us to the point that if these Dems ever get empowered, this is what they ultimately are wanting to I mean, it's pretty evident what they tried to do during the Biden years. I mean, it don't take a political genius to see that this is exactly what they tried to do during the Obama years, and because Obama was inspired by Bill Ayers and Saul Zelensky, and Biden was his protege, it sort of makes sense to why they tried to literally tear down every foundational thing in America, including capitalism, because they literally went after the capital structure of this country during the Biden and the Obama years.
Yeah, and I think they've also gotten quite a number of rhinos,
Yes, they
um,
have. Yes.
Republican in name only. And you go back to 1963, the congressman from Florida, Albert Herlong, read into the congressional record the 45 goals or tactics that the communists would do to try to infiltrate America. So World War II, America wins a two-front war. And the Soviets are like, we'll never defeat America on the battlefield. We have to rot it from within. Gramsci called it the long march through the institutions. We're going to have to infiltrate their schools, their media, their businesses, their unions, their teachers' unions, and we're going to have to infiltrate their churches and infiltrate their businesses and infiltrate their political parties. And so it says right in there, take control of one or both of the major political parties. 1963, they said our goal is to infiltrate and take control of both political parties. So they definitely infiltrated the Democrat Party, and they've made inroads.
The
Uh,
Republican.
I I speak in a lot of states. I was in Idaho. It's a majority red Republican state. They pulled me aside and they said, "Nah, we have these rhinos. If you look at their voting record, they vote identical to Democrats." And so the Democrats, they just run as Republicans. And I was in Oklahoma, they were telling me. I was in South Dakota, and they were telling me this. And you have people like Timothy Gill. He made his billions off the Quark software program for graphic design. Timothy Gill in Colorado. He is an outspoken gay man, And he said that he would not give money to federal races because you can get millions of dollars and you may or may not win. But he said he's just going to give it to state races. For a couple 100,000, you can win a state Senate seat. And you win enough of them, and you control the state Senate, you control the state House, and then you put in the governor. And for more bang for your buck, you instead of giving, $1 million and maybe get a congressman in, you can win an entire state. So they call it the Colorado Plan. It worked, and that's how they pushed abortion and marijuana and every left-wing thing you can think of in Colorado. And they do have a gay governor and a gay first man or whatever he's called.
Yeah, you're right.
Um, in Colorado. And so they've taken it to other states and they go. And so Timothy Gill would actually show up at Republican fundraisers with his checkbook. And he would go to a Republican, he'd pull out, I'll give you lots of money here. And if you receive it, then you're indebted to him. And then there's something up for a vote and the phone rings. Oh, yeah. Hey, thanks for your donation. Oh, yeah. The vote coming up. Oh, yeah. You want me to vote this way instead of that way. Well, you have a good day too. Bye. What are you going to do? Because if you don't, then you're not going to get any more of that big money and you might not win re-election. And so these Republicans, so they'll give a good speech, but then when push comes to shove, they'll find a way as an excuse to vote for the bad thing. And
Well, let me ask you this. I know that Khrushchev, it was Khrushchev, I think, that said that the communists would never have to fire a shot to take down America, that we would do it to ourselves. And I see that happening. And then you look at the landscape in New York, Minnesota, Arizona, they are putting full-fledged Marxist, Islamic, and I know the media calls them socialist, but Bill, this man Mandami and this, of course, the Minnesota thing sort of fell apart. I think the party backed away from the socialist kid that was trying to run for governor there, but mayor, but Minneapolis. But this kid in New York City, man, I tell you what, it's like that. I don't mean this to be sort of blunt, but it's like the communist leaders of Lenin, uh, Stalin, and pretty much every dictator that the Russian government's had spit him out like a clone. It's like he is their clone, but he's also got this Islamic tie to him. Have you ever seen, we'll wrap it up on this, have you ever seen a candidate like this that's been so openly, outwardly proclaiming his Marxism? Because he's not backing down and he's en route to be the next mayor of the biggest city in the world, man.
yeah, it's pretty serious. I talked to somebody over the weekend who lives in New Jersey and is actually, a member of the Trump Bedmeister Country Club there. And he said, you know what? I think this Mondami is going to win. He says the people in New York are so blind. And I saw some article that was pointing to possible funding for this person through George Soros type people. So lots of money is coming in and buying the public opinion. But by the way, this is Nikita Khrushchev
Chef.
reportedly told Ezra Taft Benson, who was Eisenhower's Secretary of Agriculture in 1958. Khrushchev said, "We won't have to fight you. We'll so weaken your economy until you fall like overripe fruit into our hands." But again, this is their idea of infiltrating, that they don't want to face us head on, but they can weaken us from the inside.
And that's what they've done. That's what they've done. Buddy, I tell you what, as I always tell you, I could sit and listen to you. If you were my professor in college, I would have gotten triple A's. I'd have just sat there and just listened to you in every class. I just would have skipped the other classes and just stayed in your class all 6 periods because you're always fascinating when you talk. On a serious note, I think as we go out of here today, I think it's wise that we thank God that the way that the country went in November with President Trump, because I do believe he's putting a pause on this. But we don't know what's ahead in 26 and 28. And I think it's a clearing call tonight that we had better make sure that this communist takeover don't take place. And we, the people, it's in our hands, Bill. I mean, it's in the voters' hands. We've got to stand up to this, and we've got to have our voices heard. This is a real threat to our foundation and our republic. It's not. This is not just some show about melodrama, and we're just throwing facts out. And well, yeah, that's why we celebrate Labor Day. This threat is as real in 2025 as it was way back then when all this stuff started coming into this country, is it not? And I'll let you wrap us up on this.
Yeah, with we can see that things can flip from good to bad and bad to good quicker and quicker. So as much as I'm happy with what Trump is doing. If the other side got the majority, I think they would flip it the other way even faster than what Trump has done.
Totally agree.
All you need is one staged crisis and them saying, "Okay, martial law." And in my book on socialism, I talk about how they would stage crises. The one was the Gleiwitz incident in 1939. Nazis wanted to invade Poland, and the world would not have approved it. But they had Nazi soldiers dress up as Polish soldiers and attack a German outpost that happened to have a radio tower. And they're giving play-by-play description of the Polish soldiers coming in and attacking the Germans. And when that went worldwide, then the Germans said, well, they started it, so we're justified in invading Poland and taking it over in 1939. It's called the Gleiwitz incident. And then the Japanese did it. They wanted to invade China, and they claimed there was a railroad explosion. And then they later investigated there was no railroad explosion. But the Japanese had an excuse to go in and kill 100,000 Chinese in Nanking, China. And, if you look at the Bay of Tonkin that got us into the Vietnam War, and we had an American ship that supposedly was fired upon, even though it was never hit. And, but that was the excuse that Lyndon Johnson used to have the Americans get involved in the Vietnam War. And you see these things throughout history, and there are those with a globalist agenda. And Klaus Schwab even said that acute crises contribute to the increasing the power of the state. So here's Klaus Schwab talking about crises, and it increases the power of the state. In other words, there are those that want to have global crises so that everybody panics, and then they can come and say, we'll fix it. Just quickly give us all your power. It's like, okay, whatever. Here's my freedom. Just fix this crisis. And then when the dust settles, you don't have any freedom left. And but that's the socialist tactic that they've used for decades.
And they're using it now, buddy.
They call it a color revolution.
Yeah.
They've got a name for it.
I think it's a wake-up call to us all tonight, and I cannot thank you enough for giving us your insight to this, as always. Next month, when we do this, we'll talk about the feast. It won't be so depressing. It'll be more uplifting. I'm just messing with you a little bit there. No, but I appreciate this because I think that I'm just going to say it, and I think our side, and when I say our side, I hate to say that because there's no sides in America. We're one country. We should be. But conservatives especially, and I've heard you say this in your seminar, and I've heard you, and I've heard you, I see a theme in your books. We tend to take things for granted a lot, and we need sometimes a jolt just to remind us what we're fighting. It goes back to your book about silence. If we do not lift our voices up against this threat will be the ultimate destruction of this nation, because I don't see, and again, I think you told me this that day in the car that that they're trying to attack our faith. And, if the pastors that are out there saying we don't need to get involved in politics, well, I tell you what, if you don't get involved in these politics, you're not going to have a country to get involved in, because the same people that you claim that you don't need to be speaking against about this communist takeover of the country, they're going to come take your religion. They're going to come take your freedom, and you won't have a pulpit. There won't be a pulpit to speak from, because that's what their ultimate goal is the eradication of the Christian faith. Is that a fair statement? I'll give you 1 minute and we'll say goodbye to this.
Yeah, yeah. So if Christians don't get involved, who's left to be involved but the non-Christian? And what are they going to do? Well, non-Christian stuff. And since they're non-Christians, they don't like Christians. So they're going to use the power of the government that the
Remove it.
Christians have let them get into and use the power of the government against the Christians.
That's what they're
And they're
doing.
going to teach in the schools that there is no God and that there's no sin, and therefore you do not need a savior. So they're undermining the entire gospel. You have to admit it's a pretty clever trick the devil's pulled to
Absolutely.
get Christians who believe the gospel of Christ, let their children be taught the gospel of Antichrist. It's like, oh, I'm spiritual. I'm not going to get involved in politics. I'm going to let ungodly people teach my kids that there's no God, there's no sin, there's no savior. It's like, oh, you're really spiritual, aren't you? Right?
We're gonna have a generation of basically infidels and unbelievers if we keep that up. Listen, buddy, I appreciate you being with me, and I will see you again next month. I hope you have a great Labor Day, and with you and your family, safe travels out there. And I will encourage people to go to your website. Tell everybody your website real quick as we close.
Yeah, it's AmericanMinute.com. AmericanMinute.com. And the name of the book that I talked about today is called Socialism, The Real History from Plato to the Present.
Good book, good stuff. Bring your checkbook when you order. Buy a bunch from them. And we always appreciate you coming on. Folks, I'll be right back in just a second. Bill Federer, everybody, AmericanMinute.com. Put some fire to that house for him. Bill, thank you so much. We'll be right back, folks.
Thank you, Chris.
And we are back in live time. And man, I've got a double feature. You're talking about a double feature, double features. We brought the big guns out tonight. We had Bill Federer just now, the greatest historian in America, and we've got the one and only James Akers, on the phone. How are you, sir? It's good to see you tonight.
Glad to be with you, Chris.
Glad to be with you, buddy. Listen, what a solemn
honor following Bill. I like his stuff.
Oh, he's good, isn't he? He's one of the best. You and him both. I always love having you both on. James, I wish we were talking about better things tonight, but
You are breaking up on me, Chris.
let me sort of care. I've been breaking up all day. We've been having network issues here. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay, let me change the phone this way. I wish we could talk about better things. Wish we could talk about better things tonight, but I wanted to get your thoughts on this terrible shooting in Minnesota.
Yeah,
And
I'm only hearing one of every 10 words.
Okay.
Chris.
how about this? I tell you what, James, let me do this. I'm going to send a Zoom link to you, and I'm going to let you zoom in. You don't have to come on the camera. I'll just audio it, okay? And give me 1 second, and I'll send it. And I'll send it to your email, and that way they can hear you better. I'm having phone problems here. Okay.
Okay.
All right, buddy.
Give her a try.
All right.
Bye.
Hang on just a second, folks. We're going to get him on. We'll get him on through Zoom. We've been having network issues all day today on the phone, and let's see here. Let's do this, and it's mainly the audio that we're wanting to get anyway. And bear with us 1 quick second here, and we will do this here. Ho, 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 ho. Bear with us, bear with us, bear with us, bear with us, bear with us. And let's see here. Participants. I'm going to copy that. And let's see here. All right, there we go. Hopefully we can get him to come on in. While we're waiting on James to come in, let me just say we're grateful to have all of you here tonight, and we hope that you are enjoying the show. Did you enjoy Bill Federer? Powerful stuff, huh? I tell you what, he hit a home run tonight. If you got a question or two, go ahead and put it in the house and statement. Good to see all of our Facebook audience in tonight. Good to see Corey, Gail, all of you folks over on Facebook. Debbie, good to see you. Julie, bless you. Bill Federer's the best, isn't he? Bill Federer is the best. And let me see if James can come on. And once we get him on, we'll adjust his volume. We won't have him on video. Let's see if he can come on. While I'm waiting on him, I do want to just play a couple of videos tonight that we've got downloaded. By the way, this is Scott Jennings today on CNN, and I think he summed up the situation in Minnesota the best last night. Roll the tape.
Well, I think the first question you have to ask is, why did it happen? I don't think it happened because of guns. I think it happened because somebody who was clearly suffering from severe mental illness
had access to
had
weapons that would allow them to carry out a terrible shooting.
And the mental illness was encouraged.
But Scott, what about people who don't have mental
I don't think we can
illness?
tiptoe around this issue. And when you look at the messages that were written in some of the materials and on the weapons that we've seen, I mean, this person obviously was in a dark place.
Obviously.
And I want to know,
Obviously.
I'm not sure the government is in that person's life enough to know, but his parents are.
But what
his
about,
family is.
Scott, what about people who don't have mental illness? We have a huge gun violence issue here in the United States.
Always the guns, isn't it? Always the guns. Always the guns. These idiots and morons, I swear. I am so sick of it. Jen Ptaki, the guns. Amy Klobuchar, the guns. Jessica Tarloff today on the 5, the guns. Guns, 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 guns. Guns, 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 guns. Never about the perpetrator who shot the guns. This is Caroline Levitt today. James is coming in just a second. This is what her comments were. And in fact, here he is right here. Let me go ahead and get him in. And this will be good. And there he is. Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Talk again for me.
Okay.
Are
we good?
Oh, we sound good. Yeah, I'm going to turn you up. And let me turn our volume up on here. And let me do this. And then this way we can do. It's good to see you tonight. They can't see you. We're audio, so that's good. I was asking you a while ago, James, about the shooting yesterday in Minnesota. It's a terrible tragedy. What's your thoughts on what the country's experienced over the last 48 hours?
Well, I mean, anytime there's a shooting and innocent students, children are involved, it's always a tragedy, and it's made a double tragedy by this fellow that did the killing in terms of the troubled life that he has lived, and we have a culture that just seems to be breeding those types of people. So this is not going to be the last disaster. I wish it was.
I wish it was too, buddy. Did you, let me turn my mic up. I got to do this the way we're doing it. Let me ask you this. You've seen the media's response and the left's today, I'm sure. Has that been, to you, more... I think the media's response and the left's response and these Democrats' response to it, especially the leadership of Minnesota, I'm not underscoring the tragedy of the kids, the 2 kids, the 8-year-old and the 10-year-old. No parent wants to experience that. I have found the response to this through tragedy even more perverse than even the killing itself. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. The whole thought of having been in, at one point in my career, education and running a school, the idea that we have to clamp down schools, especially religious and private schools, and have police, constantly on the grounds to protect the kids, it is an indication of just how fallen this culture and society has become.
Do you believe that the drugs, because I think that Robert F. Kennedy was out here saying this tonight, the drugs that are being given to these kids to transition, the mutilation drugs, this process that is so brutal on the body of these children, James, do you think that I totally agree with Kennedy. He said that he believes that this has led to some violent tendencies. There are things in these drugs that are increasing the violent nature of the transgender community. And I don't disagree with that fully. What's your thoughts on that?
I'd like to see the research on it, but it feels right to me. From I have a good friend that mentioned. It seems like every time there's a shooting at a religious school, it's a transgender type of situation that's involved, and that's um, I find that troubling, and we just need to do a better job. My wife was retired, teaching almost 38 years in special education, and the number of troubled kids, and a lot of it due to drugs that we give to kids earlier and earlier in life is just compounding all of these types of issues in terms of education, and the school systems are drowning in trying to facilitate all of these troubled kids that are coming through the system. And there are a number of cultural reasons for that, and included in that, I certainly think, is that we are giving these very powerful drugs to kids earlier and earlier, and that doesn't even mention this sort of the whole wacko thing of giving kids drugs to change their sex, and um, it is just a society that has lost all sense of moral bearings.
Let me ask you this. I said this to my brother. I talked a little bit before the show tonight with Bill Federer. I believe that this thing that happened to this country 10 years ago, in 2015, when the Supreme Court opened the door to same-sex marriage legally for all 50 states, and they basically struck down a lot of state constitutions that had prohibited that, and they opened a Pandora's box, James. I just believe, man, that we're reaping the whirlwind for these decisions, from these judicial decisions to change the dynamic of a man versus and a woman. The sex identity is not just gender, but marriage between a man and a woman, not just man and men, women and women. It started out that we started allowing that, and then it's turned into bestiality. It's turned into this attack on our kids, and now we've got literally parents, and because this is the case evidently with this young man, that his mother, and I understand tonight from Fox News, they've just reported this in the last hour. I saw it pop up when we were on the phone with Bill, that she has hired a criminal lawyer, and she is concerned that the government is going to start looking at her to be culpable in this because she signed off on this young man transgendering and transitioning to a female. Have we filled these kids' heads with so much crap, and are we reaping the whirlwind that we've basically tried to defy God, and we've tried to change the image of a man into something that God's never intended it to be? He's in man to be, and an image of a woman He never intended woman to be. Are we reaping the whirlwind a little bit tonight in what we've seen or what we're seeing?
Nobody ever wants to talk about scripture, but the letters of Paul especially point out that this sort of dynamic follows when you go away from God and God's ordinances and what God has historically and traditionally put in order, and you drift away from that so that human beings determine their own moral values. That this is exactly what's going to happen. What we are seeing in culture and society. These kids coming through have no moral polar compass whatsoever. And you're exactly right. We are reaping the whirlwind of that sort of thing.
We're not
And
only,
it's only beginning.
yeah, I was going to say it's just the beginning. And this is the school year. The last, I think they did a study. We read it last night. The last 10 shootings in America, mass shootings, mass attacks on schools or mass attacks on churches or anything, the last 10, James, has been by people who are trans. And I was sharing this with the audience, and I'll get your take on it. Then we're going to talk about a few other things. But is it fair enough to say that our voices that have tried to warn the country about this have been silenced by calls that we're bigoted? These statements by people like Michael Steele that we Christians who pray for these kids are insulting because we should be taking the guns off the street instead of praying for the kids that died. Are we not being silenced by that? And are the people that speaking the truth about it and trying their best to warn the nation not to go down this road, they're being marginalized? And again, when you reject light, James, you get darkness. When you reject truth, you get deception, man. This is a spirit. This is an absolute demonic spirit, a stronghold that has taken over the good old United States of America. Just like we were talking with Bill Federer, communism is taken over this country from within. But this spirit is also taking us over. And the combination of these two things does not bode well for our future unless we repent of these things and come back to God and come back to Him quickly.
No, I transcribe to what you just said completely, and I think there's abundant evidence for it. There are two systems, and we don't emphasize it enough. One is a system of standards, values, a traditional sense of right and wrong. The other is a worldly system where everyone does right in their own eyes. Instead of Jesus Christ being in a life to provide a standard that you can live by, you have a human standard of self-improvement. The teaching that's taken place that is infiltrated now down to the elementary levels, where it's man's despite their best efforts, man's efforts always lead to failure. This nation. This is my view. There are a ton of people that disagree with me. But this nation needs to turn back to Jesus Christ and a standard of righteousness.
Amen. 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 And it's got to start at the church because, James, I hate to say this spirit, I look, and I mean, I may not be seeing every single X post, but there's been very little statements made by the faith community, and there's been two extremes out there. You've got these kooks on the Q side that claim kids up MK Ultra. That's our fallback for everything. That it's some kind of CIA op, some kind of crazy mind control, and that this kid went in there, as a tool of somebody else to do something. And then you've got the other end of that people want to throw stones and, make it about the transgender. And again, our goal in this tonight, I do believe that this movement has been weaponized. I don't know where it's coming from. I believe Satan is using this group, and I think that we're reaping a little bit of what we've done because, James, it cannot be ignored. This mother, his parents, put this stuff in this kid's head, but it's no different than what the teachers are putting in the kid's head. And I hate to say it, brother, we've let this spirit in the church. The church can't very well lead on this because we're allowing it in our pulpits and we're allowing it in front of our young people. When you bring transgenders and you bring transgenders into youth groups to perform, and you can see that all over the church. You can see there's video after video after video of people bringing these kind of folks to read books to our kids and to make these shows, and the youth thinks it's funny, and the youth thinks it's such a joke. When you start doing that and putting this stuff in people's heads, James, you're going to reap a high price, and they have turned violent, and they're attacking Christians and Jews. Man, some of that stuff that kid wrote on those magazines, I'm going to tell you something, man. This kid had some dark stuff in his head, did he not?
He did, and society is going to reap a steady stream of this type of behavior. Even this kid, his model was what, the Sandy Hook killer. That's what he modeled his behavior on. These kids have a steady diet of these drugs, altering reality types of drugs. They watch video games that is complete violence. That if you go to a movie these days, and I'm as guilty as anybody, if you go to a movie these days, there are 15 people killed before they even get to the byline of the movie, and we have become a culture of death, and the church is not speaking out. In fact, the world is invading the church, and the church, instead of being salt and light, is becoming more like the world. It is compromising with the world.
Yeah. Well, it's going to keep compromising with the world, James. We're not going to have a church. I put it like this: there will be an apostate system in place, but the true church is what's being persecuted tonight. When this kid was writing stuff like, where's your God? Blank the kids, kill Donald Trump. Then he turned anti-Semitic with some of it. He was anti-Semitic. He said, kill all the Jews, 6 million wasn't enough. There was another report I saw out of an Israeli newspaper tonight that they found evidence that he had wrote something along the lines that we're going to kill all the nasty Zionist Jews. And then this is the freaky thing about all this. While he's writing all of that on the magazines, there was another part of this manifesto that said he was very saddened that he had been deceived, and he was very depressed about transitioning to a woman. So it's like he was so conflicted in his soul, but he could not come out of that bondage before that spirit led him to do what he did. And that should tell us what we're dealing with tonight. And I know people are trying to make this a political football. To me, it's not political. This is all spiritual, buddy. This is a spiritual conflict in the heavens over this country and over every one of us listening to this program tonight.
And it's a spiritual battle for the minds and souls of our youth. And,
yes.
And, as I always finish my talking to your folks with the admonition that God is not shaking on his throne. All of this has been predicted, and he sees the end from the beginning. But the rapidity of the deterioration of moral values in this country has been absolutely astounding. And it's not about rifles. It's not about self-improvement. It's all about a spiritual war that's taking place and is claiming lives, innocent lives, and individuals. And the most pathetic and tragic of those individuals that are being claimed are these young kids that just show up to school.
Well, I totally agree. Do you believe, I know there's no way to predict this, but are you concerned like I am that with this was the first week of school there. We're early in the school year. And I think you sort of hinted at it at the beginning that this may be the beginning of a very violent year, because it seems that they're targeting the schools more than ever, James. It seems that these attacks are growing more and more in intense and in frequency against schools all over the world, not just America, but all over the world. And that should concern parents, should it not? That the safety. I do want to talk to you one quick thing about the safety of the schools. thank God the schools were locked down enough to where he could not get into the school, because he was evidently, look, to shoot 116 rounds through a window, this kid was going to do more than, he was far more pushed to kill more than 2 kids. He was going to go in there and pretty much, this could have been far, far worse than even the 2. But is it a wake-up call to the school systems tonight that they better get their security measures straight and make sure that they do not let anybody into those doors during the time of school hours? Because I think that it's a wake-up call for all school systems around the world tonight.
Yeah, they're under attack. There's, and they need to take common sense measures to protect themselves and the students they are entrusted with the safety of. And I think, to be fair, a lot of schools, if not the vast majority of them, are taking those sorts of measures. And, it's sad. You just can't. The world of the 60s that I was brought up in a small town where everybody held mostly the same values. They may have gone to a different denomination, but basically people believe sort of the same thing. You could leave your doors unlocked at night. You could let your children go out and play wherever they wanted to play. That world is over, and we can sort of moan and groan and complain about it, and the spirit that is taking over. But the fact is that people have to adjust to a new reality, and they have to start seeing the spiritual war that's unfolding around them.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
they need to take measures to protect themselves and their own families, and to cover their children. And whenever they send their children to school, those kids need to be covered by the parents, with protection and the blood. And we need to start doing that as a culture and as a society, especially the Christian part of this society, because it is a war, and that war involves casualties, and it doesn't care whether you're ignorant or see it coming or not. Doesn't care whether your children are innocent little creatures or not. It is a war that claims casualties and thrives on a spirit of death that is, in my view, just running rampant in this country.
Very, very well said. Do you believe, a couple of more questions on this, and I got some other things I want to run by you real quick before we let you go. And it's so good to have you tonight, by the way. I was looking forward to this. I tell you, James, when these things happen, I felt sad today. I felt sad yesterday. I felt sad today. I find solace in talking to people like you, and we had Bill Federer on earlier tonight as a pre-recorded interview, but that was before the shooting. Tuesday, it happened yesterday, but I find solace in people, fellow faith folks that see what's happening in the country and they're aware of it. Do you think there was anything that could have been done that could have stopped this tragedy? Because see, the left's out there tonight with their regular drumbeat that if we take all the guns off the street, that we can avoid all of these tragedies. And I'm going to be the first to tell you, I'm not naive enough to believe that, I don't, the guy had a rifle, he had a shotgun, and he had a pistol. Now, the media's painting that rifle as an automatic weapon. That's a debate I don't want to get into. But I do believe that, where the kid got the guns from. We had somebody ask that question last night. I don't have an answer for that. I understand he got them from a pawn shop. But, common sense has to kick in. But I still believe the left is trying to take our guns. And I do believe that no matter whether this kid would have went to a pawn shop. If he was bent on doing what he did, he was going to get those guns from somewhere. If it wasn't the pawn shop, he would have found somebody else to get them. And it's the old cliche, the criminals are going to get the guns. They're trying to take the guns from the normal citizen. That jerk on CNN, you didn't hear it. We were getting you in through the Zoom call on this. But there was a jerk on CNN last night that was telling Scott Jennings, he said, well, the normal people are a threat too. It's not just the normal people are shooting people up with these guns. And why does the left always fall back on that? That's their holy grail. But it's never about the killer. It's never about the trans issue. And I will just say this. They're responsible for this trans ideology, James. They have pushed this on America, and they're reaping the whirlwind just like we are tonight. The whole country's reaping a whirlwind for it.
Yeah, they've pushed that agenda down the throats of every American citizen. I mean, you just have to scroll through the TV channels to watch it unfold. That whole agenda. The issue about the guns, I get where the left is coming from. I'm with you. If you take every gun away from every decent citizen in this country, they're going to be vulnerable to thugs and to crazies that are pushed by a spirit of death. This young man had access to every sort of self-improvement types of sessions and techniques. The problem is all of these endeavors, no matter how well-intentioned, that aim towards self-improvement, if we only could have gotten this troubled young man into the right seminar,
Yeah.
or if it could have only been taught, or if there could have only been a counselor that would have broken through somehow and turned him away from this path. What I am suggesting is that this whole notion that human beings can improve themselves, which our culture now has completely given itself over to, is a bankrupt ideology. There has to be a standard. There has to be a truth that troubled kids can latch onto, that can take them out of this spiral. And we, as a culture, are not providing that anymore. We have just given up. In Kentucky verbiage, we have bent over and grabbed our ankles, and then this whole idea of self improvement as the only way, since there's no God, really, is their thought. Since there's no God and all of these things are equal, and we can just use our best intentions and rely on human beings to improve themselves to deter individuals from this sort of behavior. It is not working, and we are going to see increasing incidents that show that this whole ideology is bankrupt.
Right. I couldn't have said it better. Since we have talked last, I don't know, was the Bolton raid? Have we talked with you since the Bolton raid, John Bolton raid?
I think we mentioned the John Bolton the last time we talked.
We did. That's right. It just happened when we had you on last, so I won't bore you with that. I do want to ask you about the National Guard, though. And I got a question out of Facebook tonight. Would you be okay with the National Guard guarding these schools? Do you think that we've reached a point that maybe the federal government's going to have to step in and start guarding the schools? It's a terrible thing to think about that, James, but you get down to it. I'm not going to say I disagree with that totally, because our kids are the most precious commodity we've got in this universe. And if it means that if that's what it takes to protect them, I don't know what to say. I just continue to believe we're on a slippery slope with this stuff, and I just Trump should not have to be doing this. If the governments and the city councils and the mayors and the governors would do their job, and I got a few vernaculars I'd like to add in front of that, he wouldn't have to do this. There's a story out that Tim Waltz was told 2 years ago by the private schools in Minnesota that they were woefully inadequate. They did not have any funds to put towards security of their schools, and he totally ignored it. He had a surplus. He put his money into making Minnesota a transgender sanctuary state. That's what he did. Are we headed to something like this if this don't stop? Because I don't know what else you can do other than bring the National Guard in and protect them. It's not a bad question.
No, it's an interesting question. My view on that is that asking the National Guard to protect schools and to come into other communities outside of the constitutional authority granted by the president to enforce order in Washington, D.C., is asking them to do a job for which they are not trained and are not inclined to do. And so there is a whole mind shift that has to take place, both on those that are receiving the National Guard and the National Guardsmen themselves. We would have to completely reorganize the way we train National Guard troops. We're already asking them to do sort of like civil emergency types of things. But when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to protecting schools, that's an entirely different creature. And before we take that giant step, as much as it makes sense from a law and order perspective and a social protection perspective, there are a number of in between steps that would have to be taken.
I'm with you 1,000,000%. That sends chills at my back to start putting National Guardsmen in schools, because you will. There's just a lot of things, and I've heard several options and several suggestions about the security at schools. Retired police officers, there's a lot of police officers that are retired, but they still want to stay involved in the law enforcement community, and perhaps these schools can hire these security firms and things like that, have armed guards, James, I tell you, that's where, and it goes back to society. We've just reached that point, man. It's became so dangerous, and it's not just trans who are the threats. These killings at Sandy Hook, all these school shootings, all these things that we've had, these massacres. It's hindsight's always 20/20, and we see the security issue always comes up. And my friend, I tell you, that's where we're at right now, and it's very troubling. I have to say. What did you think of the Washington mayor today or last night praising Trump, because she actually is now enjoying the fact that the National Guard has kept people from killing each other in Washington, D.C. 15 straight days without a murder. I tell you, when Trump starts getting the praises of the Democrat mayors, these Democrat mayors are going to lose their DNC membership card, are they not?
Well, but even that was sort of a left-handed compliment.
I know.
Up front, she sort of made it sound like a positive for the administration, and then spent the rest of the news conference sort of bashing the idea.
Yeah.
So, Chris, when it comes down to it, and I'm going to get on my soapbox here a little bit, we have in our culture now basically two types of individuals. One that thinks the government ought to do everything for them, and the other, use our ingenuity, our Christian instincts to come up with other solutions. The founding fathers of this country were not advocates of big government. They wanted to put in a federalist system that had limited big government. And we have drifted away from that idea. And this whole concept that somehow Trump, as the manager of the staggering now government bureaucracy, can somehow steer that bureaucracy to solve all of these problems is, in my mind, absolutely ridiculous and is completely out of step with what the founding fathers wanted. In terms of school security, that should be a local function. I mean, here where we're at, my property taxes, I'm being taxed to the nth degree to build more and more schools. It should be a school board function to advise the principals and the other individuals in administration on how best to protect their schools. There needs to be assistance if necessary from the state. But we cannot rely, and it's dangerous to
Very
rely,
dangerous. Very dangerous.
to rely on the federal government to come up with a solution to every problem that we have. Good heavens, we already have an entitlement generation after generation now that find it impossible to function with their own imagination and own innovation, and resent those that do.
Yeah, I'm with you, buddy. I couldn't have said it better. Man, I tell you, this hour's gone. We've already gone 45 minutes with you. I'm going to let you go, but I tell you, I want you to come back on next week. We'll pick this up, give you some final thoughts tonight. There's been some shakeup at the CDC. There's been more news on the Russiagate stuff. We'll talk about that next week with you a little bit. And James, I just think that we better understand that we may be in for a very rough year. I think that this violence is we're gonna see an uptick in what we saw yesterday, and it speaks to the fact we all need to be diligent, vigilant, and alert. All of us tonight, no exceptions to our surroundings, but we definitely need to make sure that our kids are in a safe environment. And I see that theme out there in the chat tonight. Our kids are most important, and we've got to protect these kids. And I'm going to go out. Can I get on my soapbox before you leave? Since you got on yours, let me get on mine. We get on each other's. I tell you who else we need to protect these kids from. We need to protect these kids from people like Keith Ellison that are up there in Minnesota tonight telling the country that Minnesota's going to fight to keep mutilating kids. To me, the people that are pushing this transgender ideology on our kids, they are demonic and a danger to the kids far more than this kid that was doing the shooting yesterday was. And I'm not saying he wasn't dangerous, but James, the people that put that crap in his head that made him so messed up, they are the greater danger to our nation tonight and to our children. That's the people I want to see the federal government go after. That's my soapbox. You wrap us up and we'll say goodnight.
Yeah, again, I return to this idea of a culture of death. We have there's never been more money available for counseling our young people and this, that, and the other, and there has never in the history of our country been suicide rates like we're seeing. There's a fascinating. I practiced law for a little while. There's a fascinating legal case right now where a family is suing one of the Chat B.
I saw that. Yes.
Yes, because they say
suicide. The kid put
the kid was getting advice from these algorithms and AI, and the advice actually encouraged him to commit
suicide.
suicide, and even
Exactly.
told him about the techniques of doing it. And so there's a family now that has sued OpenAI, and that is going to be a
I saw
fascinating
that
case
story.
to watch
It is.
to see how it plays out. But my broader point is that we have record levels of suicide. We have these mass shootings that are occurring far too frequently, especially in our schools, and we have voices out there that continue to deny that there are answers to the problems that trouble our kids, and those answers are found in the cross of Jesus Christ. If you say that, you are automatically branded as a bigot and a dinosaur, and that is the only truth that will prevail.
Absolutely, buddy. Absolutely, man. James, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Hope to see you soon, man. I promise we'll be this month. We got 1 month of baseball to go. We got to get it there soon, don't we?
Yeah,
But,
I've got a calendar here. I need to send you a few dates so
yeah.
we can get together.
I'd
I'd love to do it.
I'd love to do that too, buddy. Listen, you were great tonight. Thank you again. I'll see you next week. Have a great Labor Day, and our best to your family. We love you, man. I appreciate you very much. God bless.
Right back at you, Chris. Thanks
See you
again for
soon.
the opportunity. Bye
Always, my
bye.
friend. Good night. James Akers, everybody. Put some fire in that house for him. We're running late. We're almost 2 hours tonight, and I'm not going to have time to do any videos. We'll be back here tomorrow night. Possibly. It's Friday. We got the Labor Day weekend. I tell you, folks, it's I feel, I don't know. I don't know how I feel. I'm troubled on many fronts by what's transpired in our nation and so forth. But just want to read a couple of comments. I will read a couple of comments and then we'll call it a night. Corey Aguilar, you said something. I think we had talked about that. You mentioned it, and I think we mentioned this too, buddy. Good to see you tonight, by the way. She said you heard Minnesota's bishops ask the state lawmakers to provide security funding for local non-public schools a couple of years back and were denied. That is true. They asked Waltz himself. They just didn't ask the lawmakers. They asked Waltz himself, and he just ignored it. And it was at a time that Minnesota had a $18-20 million surplus. He could have spared the money. It wasn't like they couldn't afford it. That needs to be investigated. That needs to be investigated. Couple of other things. I'm seeing a lot of suggestions about training local police, private guards, and I agree that again we need some kind of security force. But folks, I will tell you this: I look at the security force and I look at the police being at the schools like this. If somebody is serious enough to do great damage and kill people, while that will deter it some, it's not going to solve the problem. And the churches, it's also not just about the schools, it's the churches. We're going to wind up in a place that to go into a house of worship, you're going to have to walk through 6 layers of security to go worship Jesus. That's not saying a lot about our country. That's not saying a lot. That's bad. It's not good. And that's where we're headed. And CJ, you're right. We are on a slippery slope in all these areas tonight. Look, I agree. I'm fully behind what President Trump's doing with the National Guard. Fully behind it. But I don't want it to have to be this way. I do not believe it's how we should handle law enforcement and cracking down on crime. You shouldn't have to bring the military into the cities to do it. And he is probably going to Chicago next and possibly L.A. Gavin Newsom, by the way, this is how scumbaggery Gavin Newsom is. He is now copying Trump's National Guard. I was told tonight, read a story that he is sending crime suppression units to all the big cities of California to cut down on the crime. Well, that's exactly what President Trump told him to do. He's taking credit for it. He's saying, I'll show y'all that we don't need the National Guard out here. But he's doing exactly what Trump is doing in D.C. It's elementary, my dear Watson. I hadn't played that one time tonight. I get to play that right now. It's elementary.
Elementary, my dear Watson.
It's elementary. It's elementary. Corey says, I think Trump is right. Should reopen and create some more mental facilities. You know, that's been something that's been debated, Corey, about the mental facilities, and I'm not going to disagree with that. Couple of other comments, and I'll say goodnight here. Somebody said, if you're conflicted about your gender, then you have a form of mental illness which precludes you from having a card to obtain ammunitions and firearms. Well, I'm going to agree with that to a degree, but the thing is this. It's not going to stop the killing. That's the whole point. We've got our idea, and that's what the left's argument is. They're saying, well, we'll do mental background checks on people. Well, folks, some of these kids you're not going to have a history of mental illness. Look, it's the parents. That parent, I tell you who I hold a little bit, I've got more disgust tonight, not for the pawn shop. My angst is to that mother. And, you know, Sheila Daspit was in the house last night, and she made a statement about the mother knowing what was going on. Look, I'm not saying we don't know this tonight. We wasn't there, and I'm just, this is just an opinion. You cannot tell me that the mother and the father saw this kid acting, because some of these videos, I don't know what the time date on them was. I don't know if they were recent. I don't know if this kid had been making these videos for a while, but it took time. All that stuff that we showed you last night, when we showed you these magazines and let me see if I can find that picture. Folks, when you look at this, and again, I'm no weapons expert, but to me, doing something like that,
where's your fucking gun?
You know, that's him, by the way. Excuse the language there. But anyway, I'll just leave it at that. I'll stop the thing and we'll keep rolling. But those kind of things, it takes time. You know, you say, well, it'll just take a few hours to do it. Well, maybe. But it takes time. And I just think this was so premeditated that somebody in his household, somebody knew what was going on. And they didn't get him any help. They were pushing this on him. And look, it's telling tonight, it's telling that she went out and got a criminal lawyer. So I don't know. I think that we as society, we want to blame, we want to find blame. We want to find blame to put on people. And I think we need to realize that this is spiritual. And the enemy is at work in the minds of these kids, but it's not helping that these kids are being taught the things they are. And I hold the people that put that crap in his head far more responsible for what happened yesterday than him. It's not the guns. You can do every background check in America. You can do every background check. You can do every mental assessment. It's not going to hide the spirits behind this stuff. It's not going to hide the spirits behind it. It's not going to reveal it, I should say. I do believe the parents could have, if they knew this kid was this messed up, got him some help. And I have a hard time, and let me change that, because I don't want to say I have a hard time believing it, because I don't know what was going through their heads. I don't know what they knew and what they didn't know. But it makes sense to me that they had to know something was up in this kid, and he was planning on something. We'll see. We'll see about that. We'll see about that. Thanking James Akers. We are grateful for James tonight. We sure are. Anyway, it's good to see everybody tonight. And Pat, you're asking about, was he living at home? I don't know. That's a good question. That question was asked on the news media today by somebody, and I don't think we know. That's an excellent question. Chris Davis says every stable-minded person needs to start carrying a firearm to protect their children. Chris, I'm going to agree a little bit with that, but the more we arm society, okay, our protection doesn't come from a gun. Our protection don't come from a gun. You can have every single citizen carrying a firearm. It's not going to protect you from evil. And I'm not taking issue with you, buddy. It's good to see you tonight, by the way, always. We're focusing on the wrong source of our protection. What's going to keep society from even needing a gun is a Holy Ghost revival. It's a Holy Ghost revival. And I know, I've even said it myself, we live in a world that is, not a world that we hope it would be, and hope it is, and going to be. So I think that putting more guns on the street ain't going to be the solution to this. Because you're going to put the guns in the hands of people that don't know how to use them. And ultimately, that's what they're wanting. The elites and these people that are behind all this stuff, that's what they're hoping for. And I think we would be wise to have cooler heads and pray and use common sense things and pray that our police force and our law enforcement agencies come to their senses and do what they're supposed to do. That's why we hire law enforcement, Chris, is to protect our communities, that we don't have to carry the guns. But, having said that, I'm not naive, because one of the communist goals is to take the guns. So I'm mixed on your comment. I'm half agreeing with it. I'm half thinking that we need to be careful going down that slope too. So I'm half and half on that. But I get your point. I do get your point, because we are in a dangerous society. I wish we didn't live in this kind of world, but we do. We are, and it's going to get worse. To me, in my opinion, it's going to get worse. I see. And I appreciate you saying that, and I understand where you're coming from. Salty says, an armed society is a polite society, I think Ben Franklin said. Perhaps. Jay says, do some of these schools shooters only claim they're trans so as to escape the general prison population? Jay, most of these people killed themselves. What are you talking about? I don't think that has anything to do with it. I know what your question is. This kid he wasn't going there to face prison. He killed himself within minutes after shooting those bullets. He turned the gun on himself, and there's been several of these shootings that's happened. I don't think that's going through their mind. I just don't think that that's going through their head. Most of these people that do this, most, not all, but most go with a suicide mission already in hand. They're and it seems to me, just based upon what I read, he had been so depressed about his life. He was so depressed that he was in this state that I think it was almost this act that he did. And I've been trying to put my head around this today. He attended that school at some point. They said he went there a year. His mother worked at that school, so that was a focal point. He had that in his head. He had the focal point of where he was going. He was depressed that he was trans. He had regretted transitioning, and he said, "I'm sorry that I believed and I was brainwashed." He literally said that in that manifesto. He said, "I'm regretting that I was so brainwashed." Well, who was he brainwashed by? He's brainwashed by his mother, brainwashed by her. And, I'll just show you the picture tonight. We do have a picture of her. I think this is the first picture that's been released of her by the media. This is from, I don't want to read what America Girl wrote. I don't agree with that. But that's the mother right there. That's a recent picture of her. But listen, I don't think these people have prison in mind. Most of them are not going to prison. They're going to take everybody out they can and then end their life. So I understand where you're coming from, but I don't believe that that's the case. I don't. Cleo says the church is either affirming the delusion or rejecting the suffering child. They need healing Jesus. They need a healing Jesus. Cleo's well said. That is absolutely right. That is absolutely right. The answer to all of this, folks, is Christ. The answer to all of this. The answer to all of this is Christ tonight. You know, it's tragic to think where that young man's at tonight. It's tragic. I look at these things eternally. I look at these things of what could have been had that young man had somebody from the church perhaps witness to him and the Lord touch his heart and he come to his senses, repent, and say, I'm not going to do this no more. I'm going to go back to being a man. I'm going to go back to living like a man. What would have happened? I'll tell you one thing would have happened. An 8-year-old and a 10-year-old wouldn't be dead tonight. There's an eternal issue to this too. It's too late for him to change now. It's too late. And Cleo's point is well taken. This nation, this world, needs a healing Jesus. Needs a healing Jesus. And the church needs to stop affirming this behavior. And it needs to stop. It needs to stop its ideology that is opening the door to this very thing into its midst. Because we very well can't be a witness to a world lost in darkness if we're in darkness ourselves. We just can't do it. We just can't do it. It's tragic. It's sad. It's sad. And yes, CJ, there's always going to be consequences to this kind of stuff. Always consequences. Alrighty. Good discussion with you tonight. I know we're a little late. We've been going along. We had 2 great guests tonight. I will see you back here tomorrow sometime. We hope you have a great Labor Day weekend. Just in case we don't come back on tomorrow night, we've been going nonstop, and every little break we can get, we're trying to take it because I've been worn out. I have been exhausted. And but we're grateful for you, and we hope that you enjoy Bill Federer and James Akers tonight. I will try to see you tomorrow night. We've got a lot of video we didn't play tonight. We'll try to get to those tomorrow night, and then we'll talk with you Sunday morning, Sunday night, faith time. We'll be on the radio tomorrow and Monday. And then Monday night, I'm not sure it's Labor Day. We may come on late Monday night, maybe not. Labor Day's a holiday. May want to spend it with my sweetheart and enjoy my family. So we'll see how that works out. But we'll be back next week. No matter what day we're back, we will be back. And I love every one of you. And I just wanted to tell you, folks, we're in this fight together. We're all fighting the good fight of faith. We need each other right now. It was so comforting tonight just to hear James Akers' voice. I've had James on a long time on this show, but there's just something about, I was so looking forward just to talking to my buddy to get his perspective on this. These things, they affect me probably differently than most. It saddens my heart. I'm not angry. I'm hurt. I'm hurt for the families. I'm hurt for those kids. It does anger me to see the left make the issue about the trans. The left makes the issue about the guns. The left makes the issues about political things. And the Republicans didn't do this, and Trump didn't do this. And if Trump would have done this, this wouldn't happen. And then these threats and these innuendos that we as Christians are bigoted and we're going to hate trans over this, and which is so far from the truth, because true Christians don't hate anybody. We love everybody. We care. I have nothing but sadness in my heart tonight for this young man. Nothing but sadness. Not only for his state that he lived in on this earth, but where he is eternally. And going out of this life like that, folks, there's no worse way to go out than the way he went out. No worse. But we that are here tonight, we need each other. And we need to care for each other and love each other and stop this tearing each other down. Stop doing the things we're doing and acting the way we're acting to others. Stop being stone throwers and be stone movers. Fight the good fight of faith. Be vigilant. Be sober, because your enemy is walking around this earth, and your adversary, like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And he's trying to devour so many tonight. And I pray that that's not you. I love you. I hope you have a good night. Put some fire in that house for James Akers and my dear friend, William Federer, tonight. God bless you. God bless this nation. God bless Donald Trump. God bless all of you and your families. And God bless America. Until tomorrow night, if we're back, Chris McDonald, have a good night, everybody. Be blessed now.